Welcome to Truespiration. My name is Shannon. If you don't remember from last week, I do want to give you a warning. I did get Invisalign, and so I might sound a little funny. I'm still getting used to them, but we can kind of go through my progress if you want. So far, I like them. But let's get into target marketing. So target marketing is when you take a broad audience and you dwindle it down into a very specific target that you want to actually talk to. These are going to be the consumers that actually want and are interested in your product. If you can identify and understand your target market, then you can learn to dominate it and learn how to speak to them in a way that they want to buy. You can't target everyone, but you can sell to everyone. And what I mean by that is that you can't target every single demographic or geographic place, but they can buy your product or service, but they're not necessarily going to be people you always want to talk to. There'll be outliers, and there'll be people who may want to just try your product, but not necessarily a repeat customer. You may also learn while you're figuring out who your target market is that it's not the initial target that you thought of. So you always have to be very willing to adapt on the fly and figure out how to talk to your new audience. It's not necessarily about selling who you want to sell to, but people who will buy your product. So you may want to think of a statement that defines your target market. So it could say something like, our target market is gender, age group, that live in this area and are interested in these activities. And it's very important to know that if you have multiple products that do multiple things, you may have different target markets for each one. For instance, if you're selling sports equipment, you're going to market to a basketball player and a football player very differently, and you're going to want to know who your target market is in each category. But finding out who your target market is will be very helpful in attracting new customers, increasing your sales, and really growing your business. And your target market could be a large audience like women, or it could be a very small niche audience, which are people who are just interested in one particular thing. And it's quite possible that your audience is going to be very diverse in nationality or gender. They just may have a very specific activity in common, and that's why they want your product or service. Target marketing is very important because it can take a very generic message like buy my product into talking to your audience in a very direct way in a language that they understand and can relate to, which will help them connect to your business or your brand. Depending on who your target market is, it affects the entire business. How you talk to your customers, how you interact with your customers, your customer service, your operations, is all going to be surrounded by who you're trying to talk to. Target marketing ties really well into branding, which we talked about last week, because depending on who you're trying to talk to is how you're going to want to brand your business. And the more relevant you make your messaging, the more people are likely to buy and spend. Without those details, you could be losing your consumers to other competitors in the market. Your target market isn't necessarily going to fit into a nice, neat box. Sometimes you're going to have to grow with your target market. So if you start with them when they're younger, your target market may change depending on the generation. And it's very important that you adapt your language and who you're marketing to depending on which generation you're talking to. So what does your target market consist of? Your target market could be consumers or it could be a business. So you have to decide who you're trying to sell to. One way to find your target could be geographically. If you're a brick and mortar store, especially a small one, it may make more sense for you to target consumers that are only in your area within like a 5 to 10 mile radius. So geographic target marketing could be by zip code, city, neighborhood, state, country. It all depends on how far your reach can be. If you can't ship internationally, keep it within wherever you live. If you're unable to travel outside of where you are, make sure that you keep your target defined to where you can be. Another big way to define your target is demographically. So by gender, age, race, religion, economic status, marital status, you're going to talk to each person a little differently. You may also want to look into psychographic behaviors, their socioeconomical status. You're going to talk to people who are making more money differently than you're going to want to talk to people who are making less money. You may also want to look at their behaviors and what they're interested in, what their buying habits are, and what they prefer to spend their money on. One other big one is generation. You talk to different generations and very different things. A Generation Z and a baby boomer have completely different lifestyles and are in complete different stages of their life. Gen Z are very tech friendly and tech savvy. You may want to talk to them in a very easy and convenient way, whereas baby boomers may really want to understand what they're buying before they buy it. You may also want to look into cohorts, which are people who experience different things in childhood. If they were from a single mom household, if they were from a dual parent household, if they went to boarding school, public school, or private school. This may gear more towards a nonprofit who's trying to fill a specific need in their community. It's also important to see where you fit in people's life stages. For instance, if you're trying to sell something to someone who's just getting out of college, their mindset and their goals are very different than someone who may have just been newly married, or even people who are just newly divorced. They all have very different interests and very different goals in their life at that moment in time. So depending on what you're selling, you may want to see if you can fit there. Check out your target's behavior too. Are they more interested in going to nail salons? Are they more interested in their cars? How do you fit into their lifestyle where you can reach them in a different way than just on their social media page? For instance, if you do hair, maybe you want to try to get into nail salons because you're trying to reach people who pamper themselves. So how do you find your target market? You're going to want to create a buyer persona, and a buyer persona is you writing down who your ideal customer is, down to maybe what they look like, what they're interested in, where they live, what they're looking for in your product or service, and how you may be able to reach them. So how you're going to do that is look back into what we just talked about and go deeper into it. You're going to want to make sure that you're not excluding people, and you're going to want to make sure you're being very sensitive to how people identify, especially in this day and age. You don't want to exclude somebody from buying your product. You want to make sure everyone's included, and even though they may not be your target market, they can still purchase your product. So be very aware of how you're speaking to your audience and in your messaging. You're going to want to look at the demographics, their professional roles, the challenges they may have, and then also what they're looking at while they're online. You can find that out through your Google Analytics or your social media analytics as well, to kind of see what are people in your target market searching for and what are they already interacting with. You can also just ask them, create a survey on SurveyMonkey, or if you already have a customer database, do a quick little survey at the end. When you call larger companies, they'll ask if you mind taking a quick survey at the end of the call. It's not a big deal for people to say yes or no to answering just a few questions about your business so that you can better understand them. Like I said earlier, with technology, it's a lot easier to kind of track your customers because you have web analytics and social media analytics. You can also do social media listening, where you get a program and you type in what your product or service does, and it will give you a list of where they're talking about it online and what they're saying and what groups they're in. Also with social listening, it goes off of what your competitors are talking about, so you can kind of see what their language is and how they're reaching your consumer. You're going to want to look at what problem your product or service is solving. So you're going to want to see, are you helping babies fall asleep? Are you helping women feel better about themselves? Are you helping a company grow? Whatever your target market is, you're going to want to look at what benefit you offer. Think about also who is most likely to buy your product. Think about who is likely to have the problem that you're trying to solve. Where are they in their life? How can you reach them? Where are they shopping? Where are their interests? Are they individuals? Are they businesses? Are they families? Look into all of that. You also are going to want to look back into what I was saying earlier about different products and different services have different target markets. So if you offer multiple services or multiple products, you're going to want to look deep into each one to see where your target is. Don't be surprised if your target market starts off really broad, like millennials, and then dwindles down to millennials in college in this area. It's going to start to become very specific, and that's what you want in order to achieve the best conversion rates. This is really going to help you build a very strong brand loyalty because they're going to be able to connect with your product. For instance, if you shop at Chewy and you know that they love animals, and how you can tell is that when you buy something from them, if it doesn't work for your animal and you want to return it, they ask you to donate it to a shelter or to another animal that can use it. I know when I bought a harness for my dog and it didn't fit, they said to keep it, they refunded my money, and they said to donate it on, which I did. And so because I'm an animal lover and they're an animal lover, now I feel a connection with them and I want to help them further their business. Knowing your target market is also very important when you're trying to improve your product or service, because the more you're able to communicate with your target market, the more availability they have to communicate back with you and the comfortability to tell you what they want to see change in your product. At the bare minimum, you're going to want to answer these following questions. What is their gender? How old are they? What are their interests and hobbies? Where do they live? How do they make their living? How much do they make? Do they own or do they rent? Because if you're talking to somebody who owns, their interests are very different than somebody who rents. So those are the main demographics that you're really going to want to look at if you don't want to dwindle it down to a very specific target. At the very least, know that. Make sure you pay very close attention to what your competition is doing. What are they saying to their target market that you can leverage for yours? You're not going to want to repeat exactly what they're saying, but maybe they're missing an opportunity that they haven't thought about that you can showcase in your product or service. Where are they positioning themselves in the market? Are they online, or are they doing more traditional where they're in print, newspapers, in the community? When you're compiling your data, you're going to want to make sure that you're not asking your consumer 1,000 questions. The more questions you ask, the less they're likely to give. Especially not all at once. You're not going to want to bombard them with 1,000 questions about themselves, because that can get kind of iffy and people can become very uncomfortable and then just decide not to give you any of their business. Don't always assume that your target market knows exactly what you're selling. They may be your target market and not really realize that you're solving a problem that they're having. So make sure that when you are telling them what you do, be very clear and concise and show them how your product or service is going to benefit them. One very big benefit to social media is that it does have analytics that show what time your customer is more than likely to be online. That's very important to know, because if you're running your social ad more during the morning time, and let's say your consumers are a mom who works, during the morning time they're going to be busy getting their kids together, getting ready, and dropping people off. So they may be online more at night. So you're going to want to make sure you know what time they're going to be seeing your ads in order to run the most effective ad. This will also help you with your pricing structure, because if you can see how much your consumer is making, you can kind of figure out what price range your product or service needs to be in. If you're trying to market to a business, you're going to be looking at completely different aspects. You're going to want to look at who in the company you're trying to reach. Are you trying to reach the CEO, the head of marketing, the CFO? Who's going to benefit the most in that company from your product or service? You may also market to a large company or a small company, so you're going to want to know how many employees that company has and where you fit in. Because if you've worked in corporate America, not everybody understands what other departments do. Just because you're in marketing, you may not understand digital marketing, you may not understand social media, you're definitely probably not going to understand accounting. So depending on what your product or service is, you're going to want to really make sure you're talking to the right person in that business. When talking to your target market, you're going to want to make sure that you are very clear and concise on your messaging and saying not just what your product or service is, but what the benefit is and how you solve the problem for them. And just remember that your features is what your product or service does, but the benefits are the results. If you're not sure what your benefits are, ask your current consumers. They can tell you what they use your product for. They could be using your product or service in a way you didn't even think about at first. It's very important to keep in mind that your target market is going to probably change. People grow, people adapt, people change their lifestyles, and it's very important that you stay consistent or you grow with your target. If you want to keep the same target always, you're going to have to understand that as people get older, as people move into new stages of their life, you have to talk to them a little differently. When you're talking to a young kid and you want to move up to them as a teenager, their thoughts, their problems, their interests all change as they get older. So make sure that your target marketing and who you're trying to talk to is always going to be changing. It's always going to be adapting. And in order for you to succeed, you have to constantly make sure that you're keeping up with that. Also be very aware of social media platforms. In this day and age, more than likely, everybody in your target market is going to be on some sort of social media platform. If you're more for consumers, they could be on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. If you're more on the business side, then maybe more on LinkedIn and Twitter. It all depends on who you're trying to talk to and what you're trying to talk to them about. People trust different platforms for different things. So like I said last week, how branding is an ongoing thing, so is target marketing. You're always going to want to be nimble, you're always going to want to be flexible and always adaptive. And the best way to find your market is to just test it out. Test out social ads on different demographics, see how they perform. Document it, re-research it if you need to. Advertising on social platforms is a lot easier now. It gives you different targets you can reach, and you can kind of play around with it and not worry about wasting a lot of money because it's very cost effective. Make sure that you're being very consistent when you're doing your targeting and that you're just changing little things here and there. That way you're not getting confused on who you're trying to talk to. So that's kind of a wrap up of all of this. It is very important for any business to figure out who they're trying to talk to. Just because you have an amazing product or an amazing service doesn't necessarily mean everybody in the world is going to want it. And if you don't know who you're talking to or how to talk to them, it could be the best product or service in the world, but no one's going to buy it. So figure out who you want to talk to, how you need to talk to them, and how you can really help them. Because that's what people and consumers and all businesses want to know, is how can you help me better my life? And if you can answer that for them, they will be more loyal, they will be evangelists of your product or service, and they'll tell all their friends, and you can get more and more customers and increase your sales and become the biggest success that you want to be. This has been a lot of information, but I am here to help. If you have any questions, you can email me at info@truespiration.com. You can message me on my Facebook page at Truespiration Inc. or my Instagram at Truespiration Inc. If you would like to purchase a t-shirt, you can message me and I will let you know how to get it. Tune in next week for business planning, and I look forward to seeing you then. My name is Shannon, and thank you for stopping by. See you next week.